Tonight, for the first time since her 2023 murder conviction, the parents of 20-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla are speaking out. Shirilla was 17 when she crashed her car, killing her boyfriend and their friend. In a 3 News Investigates exclusive, her parents insist it was an accident and not murder. They're now sharing details of Mackenzie's life in prison and fighting to clear her name, even as prosecutors stand by the evidence that put her behind bars.
My God.
In July 2022, a day that brought a mix of pain,
I struggled with this because
relief, and guilt.
Because how can I feel bad that these 2 boys died and feel grief with these families and then be absolutely overjoyed that my kid is alive?
It's been almost 3 years since the deadly crash in Strongsville that killed Mackenzie Shirilla's boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and their friend, Davion Flanagan. Now, Shirilla's parents are speaking out, insisting that the justice system got it wrong.
Show me one piece of evidence, one, that says she did this on purpose. Show it to me. Here it is. That's it. Then she's right where she belongs, and she's guilty of it. But there isn't any.
Prosecutors argued that she intentionally drove into a building without ever hitting the brakes, with black box data showing the car sped up to 100 miles an hour. They also argued that 2 weeks before the crash, Shirilla allegedly threatened to crash her car during an argument with Russo. The court cited it as proof of premeditation.
And she said, "Dominic, I'm going to crash this car."
But her parents maintain there's another explanation. A new legal team now arguing medical evidence the first trial missed, with a UH neurologist concluding that Shirilla suffered a medical episode at the time of the crash and a loss of consciousness, something prosecutors called speculative. Shirilla's latest court filing also includes text messages they claim flipped the narrative over who was threatening whom in the weeks before the crash, with texts from Russo purportedly saying, "I'm sorry."
There's no evidence what was going on in that car other than the information they gleaned from the black box information.
This was not reckless driving. This was murder.
In the 2023 bench trial, the judge found Shirilla guilty of murder and sentenced her to 15 years to life.
And these poor families think she did it intentionally, and she didn't. And and they don't know. There's information they didn't see. There's information they didn't have. There's information we didn't see or have.
Should she be in prison for murder?
No, absolutely not.
Should she be in prison for aggravated vehicular homicide?
I don't even know about that aggravated part.
I don't know about the aggravated part, because I don't think you can still say, well, I was going on the car. Should she have been charged with reckless vehicular homicide, 2 counts? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not if it was medical.
Today, Mackenzie Shirilla is now in an Ohio women's prison in Marysville, where her mom says they chat every day, whether by text from a tablet or by phone.
She does a lot of painting. She paints.
What kind of hopes, what kind of expectations do you have for Mackenzie's future?
That the truth will set her free. That's what I need to have happen. The truth, that there was no intent, that part, the truth will set her free.
The Ohio Supreme Court has already rejected her appeal of the verdict, and earlier this month, the lower court rejected Shirilla's petition for a new trial, which is now under appeal. Now, we do want to note that Shirilla's father is a former WKYC employee, not in the news department.
The case of Mackenzie Shirilla is one that defies the standard logic of tragedy. It is a story of calculated velocity and a living death that was born in the seat of a Toyota Camry. On July 31, 2022, in the early morning stillness of Strongsville, Ohio, the silence was shattered by the sound of an engine pushed to its absolute limit. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip of the foot. It was, as the judge would later describe it, hell on wheels. Mackenzie, then just 17, drove her car into a brick wall at 100 miles per hour, intentionally killing her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and their friend, Davion Flanagan. As we stand here in 2026, the finality of her sentence has begun to set in. 2 life terms. No hope of parole for at least 15 years.
She is being called hell on wheels. The petite teenager shows complete shock as the judge reads the verdict.
This was not reckless driving. This was murder.
It's one of the most unusual murder cases in memory. The teen, accused of slamming her car at 100 miles per hour into a brick wall, killing her 20-year-old boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and his friend, 19-year-old Davion Flanagan, who was sitting in the back seat. In this surveillance video, you can hear Mackenzie's car whizzing by like a speeding rocket. Then you hear the crash right into the brick wall. Evidence at the trial indicated Mackenzie wore her fuzzy Prada slippers and that the accelerator pedal was being pushed down at 100% capacity. Somehow, Mackenzie survived. Prosecutors said Mackenzie was on a mission of death and had methodically planned a murder-suicide. She even conducted a practice run several days earlier.
Her cell phone had been at the crash site just several days before this crash. And this is down in Industrial Park. It is not a cut through to where she lived. And so it was sort of an out-of-the-way place for her to be.
At her trial in Cleveland, Ohio, the judge let her have it.
Mackenzie decided death was the ultimate goal that day, and she alone made that decision for Dominic and Davion.
Behind Mackenzie, her mother looks equally stunned by the verdict. Before her conviction, Mackenzie posted this bizarre video on TikTok.
I'm not even cool. I'm just one of those girls that can do a lot of drugs and not die.
And on a memorial page to Dominic Russo, Mackenzie writes, "God, you are the last person to deserve this. You had such a perfect life ahead of you. I miss you."
But for Mackenzie, the living death didn't begin when the cell door closed. It began the moment she decided that her reality was more important than the lives of those sitting beside her. Death would have been a quick release for the chaos she caused, but instead, she is trapped in the slow, agonizing friction of a life that stopped at 100 miles per hour. I want to welcome you back to the channel. We investigate the cases the world tried to forget, looking for the truth in the spaces between the headlines. If you find value in these deep dives, please subscribe and join our community of investigators. And as we begin, tell us where you are watching from today, whether it's the United States, Canada, Australia, or beyond. Leave a comment below. We read every single one. The timeline of that morning is a clinical study in premeditated destruction. It wasn't a gradual buildup. It was a sudden, violent choice. Mackenzie didn't just drive fast. She accelerated into a dead end. Use your senses to imagine the scene. The high-pitched whine of a 4-cylinder engine screaming at redline, the lack of tire screeching because there were no brakes applied, and the absolute terrifying silence that followed. The impact. This was chaos in its purest form, a 100 mph collision that left the car unrecognizable and the 2 young men inside with no chance of survival. Mackenzie, however, survived. She sat in that wreckage, a survivor of a catastrophe she authored, while the lives of Dominic and Davion were extinguished in a fraction of a second. When we look at the missed red flags, the pattern is chilling. This wasn't a girl who suddenly snapped. This was a girl who had been signaling her detachment for months. There were the TikTok videos, disturbing, ego-driven clips where she joked about being the girl who could do anything and get away with it. There was the toxic, volatile relationship with Dominic, marked by threats and intense emotional manipulation. The red flags weren't just waving, they were screaming. But in the world of suburban normalcy, these signs are often dismissed as teenage drama. The psychology of Mackenzie Shirilla suggests a profound, pathological narcissism, a belief that she was the protagonist of a story where everyone else was merely a supporting character to be discarded when the plot required it. Now, let's look at the Milestone Erasure that has defined her life since the sentencing in August 2023. Mackenzie was 19 when she was sent to the Ohio Reformatory for women. In a world that prizes youth and beauty, she has traded her most valuable years for a concrete box. By the time she is even eligible to breathe fresh air as a free woman, she will be in her mid-30s. The life she imagined for herself, the TikTok fame, the relationships, the simple freedom of a summer night, has been systematically deleted. She will never have a wedding in her 20s. She will never build a career in the digital age she so desperately wanted to conquer. while her peers are graduating college, starting families, and traveling the world, Mackenzie is marking her time in the rhythm of prison meals and headcounts. Every day is a milestone of what she will never have. As of January 2026, she is housed in a facility that is a far cry from the suburban comfort of Strongsville. The Ohio Reformatory for Women is a place where the dehumanizing routine is the only thing that is consistent. The lights come on at 6 a.m., a sterile, fluorescent reminder that she is no longer in control of her own narrative. The food is served through a metal slot, a daily indignity for a girl who once lived for the aesthetics of social media. Her world is now defined by the concrete box, a cell that is a physical manifestation of the dead end she drove into. In this environment, the prison hierarchy is her new reality. In a place filled with women who have lost everything, a girl who intentionally killed two people for leverage in a relationship is not viewed with sympathy. She is a target, a pariah in a place of pariahs. If you've stayed with me this far, you aren't just a casual viewer. You're an investigator. We are building a community of people who refuse to let these stories fade into the concrete. Hit that subscribe button and join our ranks. Help us grow this circle of voices so we can bring more light to these forgotten halls. Now let's look at the evidence they didn't want you to see. The evidence that truly chilled the courtroom wasn't just the crash data, it was the aftermath. Mackenzie's behavior in the hospital, her apparent lack of concern for the boys she had killed, and her focus on her own injuries revealed a psychological profile that was fundamentally incapable of remorse. She didn't mourn the loss of Dominic and Davion. She mourned the loss of her own freedom. This is the inside-the-walls reality that most people don't see, the absolute flatness of her emotional response. In prison, this translates to a life of total isolation. She is surrounded by people, but she is utterly alone in her lack of empathy. The legal updates for 2026 show that her appeals have hit a wall. Her lawyers tried to argue that the murder charges were too harsh for a car accident, but the appellate courts have remained firm. The data from the car's computer doesn't lie. 100% throttle, 0% brakes. It wasn't an accident. It was an execution. This permanent limbo is her new home. She is waiting for a future that may never come, in a system that has decided she is too dangerous to be part of society. Stay with me, because in the next part of this excavation, we are going to look at the digital ghost she left behind. The TikToks and messages that prove the hell on wheels wasn't just a metaphor, but a mission. We will examine how a girl who lived for the camera finally found a lens she couldn't manipulate, the forensic eye of the law. To understand the living death of Mackenzie Shirilla, we have to look at the digital ghost she left behind, a trail of pixels and vanity that serves as the blueprint for her own destruction. In the months leading up to that July morning, Mackenzie wasn't just living a life, she was performing one. Her TikTok account was a gallery of the suburban narcissist, filled with videos that, in 2026, feel like a pre-mortem analysis of her psyche. In one particularly haunting clip, she looks directly into the camera and declares that she is the girl who could do anything and get away with it. It wasn't just a boast, it was her fundamental operating system. She believed that the rules of gravity, morality, and consequence simply did not apply to her. This fantasy of impunity is what allowed her to press the accelerator to the floor. She didn't see a brick wall. She saw a dramatic climax to a story she was directing. The toxic cycle between Mackenzie and Dominic Russo was the engine that powered this tragedy. This wasn't a romance. It was a battle for leverage. Forensic data recovered from their phones in early 2026 reveals a relationship defined by emotional hostage-taking. Mackenzie used her car as a weapon long before the final crash. There were records of previous threat drives, where she would speed or drive erratically to terrify Dominic into submission. This is the part most people don't understand. The 100 Mewamesh crash wasn't an isolated incident of rage. It was the final, escalated version of a control tactic she had used dozens of times before. But on July 31st, the leverage broke. As she sits in the Ohio Reformatory for Women today, the Milestone Erasure has moved into a deeper, more permanent phase. At 21 years old, She is entering what should be the most vibrant chapter of her life. In the outside world, this is the era of graduation caps, first apartments, and the beginning of professional identities. For Mackenzie, the only identity she has is Inmate WW108152. She is surrounded by women who are decades older, women whose crimes were born of desperation or addiction. Mackenzie's crime, born of pure cold entitlement, puts her in a unique circle of isolation. She is a predator of convenience, and in the prison hierarchy, that carries a heavy tax. She is not just serving time. She is serving the weight of being the girl who killed for an ego trip. The victim's voice, in this case, is a deafening roar that Mackenzie tries to drown out with the static of prison life. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan were not just passengers. They were young men with agency, dreams, and families who now exist in a state of permanent mourning. Davion, in particular, was an innocent bystander to a toxic drama he didn't create. He was a friend who hitched a ride and ended up in a grave. In 2026, their families have become the architects of a different kind of legacy, one of advocacy and a refusal to let the car accident narrative persist. They have ensured that the world knows this was murder. This pressure is why Mackenzie's appeals continue to fail. The justice system is finally listening to the silence of the victims. The dehumanizing routine of her 2026 reality is a mirror of the control she once exerted over others. In prison, every second of her day is dictated by a whistle, a bell, or a barked command. The girl who could do anything can now do nothing without permission. She cannot choose her clothes, her hair, or her company. She is trapped in a concrete loop, where the only thing that moves at 100 MEP is her own regret, if she is even capable of feeling it. Psychological evaluations from late 2025 suggest that her narcissism has morphed into a victim complex. She doesn't see herself as a killer. She sees herself as a girl whose life was ruined by a mistake. This inability to grasp the finality of her actions is the most chilling part of her profile. It means the living death is not a journey toward redemption, but a static state of denial. Stay with me, because here is the part most people don't understand about the inside-the-walls reality for a high-profile inmate like Shirilla. The notoriety she once craved on social media has become her greatest liability. In the general population, she is the TikTok killer. Every time she walks to the yard, every time she enters the mess hall, she is under the microscopic gaze of 1,000 eyes that know exactly what she did. There is no anonymity in a concrete box. She is a permanent headline in a place where headlines are a target on your back. As we look toward the final words of this excavation, we will confront the philosophical reciprocity of her sentence. We will ask if 15 years to life is enough for the calculated erasure of 2 lives. We will look at the 2026 legal landscape and the no-sympathy reality that has settled over the Strongsville community. Mackenzie Shirilla thought she was driving toward a destination. She didn't realize that the destination was a living death that would last much longer than the $100 me-ph journey it took to get there. The 2026 legal landscape for Mackenzie Shirilla has become a graveyard for her expectations. As her final appeals were processed in the early months of this year, the judicial system sent a clear message. Gravity is not just a law of physics, it is a law of consequence. The no-sympathy reality has fully solidified. To be direct, this is not a story about a mistaken teenager or a tragic lapse in judgment. The pain of the Russo and Flanagan families is the only true north in this investigation. Their lives were shattered not by an accident, but by an act of absolute ego-driven agency. Mackenzie Shirilla is not the victim of a harsh system. She is the author of a 100-mile-per-hour execution. We must now confront the philosophical dilemma of this specific living death. In our justice system, we often struggle with the concept of justice versus velocity. Does a sentence of 15 years to life truly balance the scales for a crime that took less than a minute to commit? We call this a civilized punishment, allowing Mackenzie to age, to breathe, and eventually, to potentially walk free in her late 30s. But for Dominic and Davion, there is no parole. There is no aging. They are frozen in the violent amber of July 31st, 2022. Is the living death of a concrete cell a fair trade for the permanent silence of a grave? The 2026 reality inside the Ohio Reformatory for Women has forced Mackenzie into a state of social erasure. The digital world she once craved has moved on. The TikTok trends have changed, the platforms have evolved, and the followers she once valued have deleted her from their memory. She has become a digital ghost, a cautionary tale that parents tell their children about the lethality of narcissism. In the prison yard, she is a reminder that entitlement has a very real, very heavy price. The prison hierarchy has placed her at the bottom because her crime lacked even the logic of desperation. It was a crime of pure, unfiltered self-interest. As Mackenzie reaches the milestone of her early 20s, the physical decay of her environment is becoming her only reality. The vibrancy of youth is being replaced by the gray, sterile monotony of the concrete box. This is the part most people don't understand. The psychological toll of knowing that your best years are being spent in a place designed to break you. Every morning at 6 a.m., the lights serve as a reminder that she is no longer the director of her own life. She is merely an occupant of a space that the state has reserved for those who refuse to value the lives of others. The final question I leave for you is this. In the age of social media and the protagonist syndrome, is the case of Mackenzie Shirilla a fluke, or is it a warning? Have we created a culture where the search for leverage and drama can become lethal? Tell me in the comments. I want to know if you believe 15 years is enough for a 100 mepiwars execution, or if the living death should be permanent. We are a community of investigators, and your voice is the final piece of this puzzle. Let that sink in as the engine noise finally fades into the silence of the cell block. The case of Mackenzie Shirilla is just one file in a very dark cabinet. In our next video, I'm opening the vault on a story even more chilling than this one. A case where the mask of normalcy wasn't just worn, it was surgically attached. If you aren't subscribed, you're going to miss the update that changes the way you look at the justice system forever. Don't get left outside the walls. Join us, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.